In this video, we will learn basic Redux concepts which you can apply to any application. You can apply it to React or any other framework. Redux is a state management tool independent of React. In an upcoming video, we will learn how to use it with React, but in this, we will learn only the basic concepts. Let's start with an example of React-like application structure. Any application in React has this kind of multi-level component hierarchy. There is an app component at the top, then we have a newsfeed component, then some post components. So we have taken a Facebook kind of architecture. In each of these components, you have states. Generally, when we update the state, you get a new UI. Now to update the state, there are many ways. The state can update itself in the component, or it can come through a data flow. Data flow can happen from top to bottom, which is very common in React and quite easy to do through props. The other way is to change bottom to top data, in which we pass some functions through props, which is kind of complex if you have seen our other videos. If you are not sure, you can watch our downward and upward data flow videos in this playlist. Now Redux changes this whole scenario. And in Redux, what we want is to have a global state at the top. This global state is easy to change with Redux and easy to pass on to lower components through the downward data flow. Downward data flow, as you know, we do it through props and it is quite easy to do in React or any other application. Now let's see when Redux is needed. There are some scenarios in which you should use Redux, in others you should not. When your application is moderately complex, or you can say overly complex, if you have a very simple app, you should not use Redux. The other scenario is when you have a lot of components in your hierarchy. If you have a lot of components, then obviously good to have state at the top. Then if you have a lot of change in state going on, you should use Redux. If you have no changes in the state or very rare changes, it's not useful to use Redux. Now let's take a simple analogy of a bank and a user. You go to your bank and suppose you have a balance of $100. Now let's say you want to deposit some more money in the bank. So the deposit is kind of action you want to take. You deposit like $10 in the bank. This procedure is called credit in bank terms, because you have been credited with $10. Now your balance should be updated to $110. Now let's see this whole system in Redux way. Your bank is Redux store, where we store everything like records and procedures. Your balance record is Redux state. The state can be your other information also, but in this case, just to simplify, it is your balance of $100. Now dispatch is a method which sends an action. Here dispatch is your manual visit to the bank counter, and action you have taken is called deposit action. The amount you deposited is also kind of a data associated with the action. Now the bank has some procedures like credit procedures, which we will call reducers in Redux terms. Now you can see with any deposit action of $10, the balance becomes $110. So this is an update to a new balance, or you can say new state. Let's take another scenario. In this scenario, you want to take some money out of the bank. So you dispatch different action called withdrawal to withdraw $10. Suppose your state or your balance right now is $110. There will be a reducer in the bank called debit, which will run and it will cut $10. Now your next balance is $100. So reducer works on two inputs, your action and your previous state, and gives out a new state. Later in the code, we will see how to use this reducer with those inputs, like the action and the state, to give a new state. So let's revise all the concept which we have learned till now. You have a store in which you have a state, like your account info or anything else. In store, you also have reducers, which can be different procedures like credit or debit. You have a dispatch also. In our case, the dispatcher is someone who goes to the bank. In real application, it will be the events, like the on-click function events. All those things are dispatchers. Then action can be of two types, deposit or withdrawal. And there is an amount also. So deposit and withdrawal is called the action type. And this amount associated will be called action payload. So these are all the terms. Now let's understand in terms of a JavaScript programming context. State is a global state object of your app, which stores everything about your app or nested component, like a nested JavaScript object. Right now, you assume that only state you have is a balance. An action is an object that has a type field like deposit and a payload like 10 here. Reducers are the functions which receive two things, current state and action object. Depending on that, they give you a new state. So that is a simple formula. Store is the container in which you have all the reducers, and because reducer work on actions, you can say store contains everything. So get state is kind of a method from which you get the latest state of the store. Dispatch is a way in which you call actions. Store also has this dispatch method and which can be used to dispatch some actions. So this whole cycles, everything is in the store. Now let's understand the sequence of thing going in an app. We have taken this diagram from official Redux documentation. Here you can see on the right side there is a store, and in that there are 3 reducers. Also there is a state which is attached to the store. Also we can see below that there is a UI component. It has deposit and withdrawal 2 buttons. When you press these buttons, an event will occur. And there is an event handler shown in the diagram on the left part. In the handler, we always call the dispatch method of the store, which dispatches some action. Let's see all these things in actions through animation. Everything starts from the UI. When a user comes, it presses some button, it generates an event. This event goes to event handler. Event handler dispatches the action, and action goes to the reducer. Inside the reducer, action work alongside with the previous state and provide a new state. Like here, old state was $0 and action added $10. Now new state is updated to $10, and same thing will be updated in the UI, and we have a new balance. So we have understood the architecture and workings of Redux. Let's jump into a simple code. So here is a simple JavaScript index.js, and it is attached to an index.html file. Side by side in the console, we are getting the output of this JS file. Right now console is printing hi. I am importing the first thing from Redux package, and it is called create store. Before this, don't forget to install Redux package through npm install or yarn, whatever you like. After that, you can import create store from Redux. Now using create store, let's create a constant store. So you can put an empty object, but it will throw an error because it requires a reducer. So every store requires some reducers, and reducers are function. So I put an empty arrow function just to validate it. This will not throw an error, but right now this is also not valid because there should be some valid reducers. So we'll correct it later. Right now let's move forward. Next thing, we'll create some kind of action. So I'll say speak action, and this is an again arrow function. This is actually an action generator, not an action. It returns an action object. So generally we use action generators. What it returns must have a type and a payload. You know, these are the 2 things in action. Type generally we put in capitals, and right now there is no payload. So we have not put it. Just to make simple, we'll add it later. Now I'll create a speak reducer. As we see, there are 2 inputs, state, which has a value of default state, and I have taken a blank object, and an action. Now we can return the new state from this reducer. I'm not modifying anything and just returning the same state. So this reducer is kind of dumb, but it is a complete reducer. Whatever it takes, it returns the same. But we don't have to make such dumb reducers. What we'll do, we'll put the switch block. And in switch block, we have different type of cases depending on action type. The first case in the switch, we will write as speak, which is the only case we have. In this case, we will return some value. So I'll just say text, key, and high value. So I'm kind of rewriting the whole state itself. Like this is the whole state which I am returning, which is not the best thing usually. We take old state and modify it. But in this example, I am doing this very simple thing. Finally, default case is return the unmodified state, which we returned below also. So in any case, we return a state. If there is an action type which matches, reducer will go and process and return some state. If no thing is matching, then we return a default state. Now let's move the store down, as store uses the reducer and the definition should be earlier to the usage. Now you can call store.dispatch and let dispatch some speak action. Right now, how we will know that something happened after dispatch? As we don't have any code which will observe the state changes. So we will use something called a subscribe method, where you subscribe to the updates on the store. And in console log, we will write store changed. Whenever there is some change in the store, your subscription will detect it and it will show it. So I'll put a dispatch after subscribe, so that subscription is done first. Now see, as the state changes, something comes on the console. We can't see what is changed in the state. For that, we have to use a getState method. I'll also put getState here. So whenever there's a change, let's see, it says text hi. So this is the change right now, text hi. This is the return state. This means your actions are working properly. This is not a very meaningful action because every time we call action, same state comes, text hi, text hi. So what we want to change, we put some input in the generator function, and this text I put as a payload for our action. We have this text passed as the object shorthand. So remember what is the object shorthand. And we can write it inside action.text. Now to test, I pass two different payloads, hello and hey. Now you see there are two different state outputs in the console for each of these calls. So let's see the whole process. We call this action generator, which has returned an action with the type and text as payload. Now reducers get called. In switch, we see the action type, it matches the speak type. So this return an object, which is your new state. And because we use getState, this gives you the global state. You can see the changes in the subscribe method. Now please don't worry how this subscription works and where we will put in our apps. Generally, in a library like React Redux, which we'll see in upcoming video, subscriptions are done automatic and you just have to dispatch actions. In next video, we'll learn about these things. Right now, our purpose was to understand the whole concept of Redux, the whole cycle of Redux, and how state management is done. If you want to learn the fundamental concepts of web development and many interesting project and code examples, please subscribe to this channel.